All right, welcome back to the Picking Your Brain podcast, where we interview people doing ministry at a high level. And on today's episode, we have Caleb Monaghan. What's up, Caleb?
What's going on, man?
Man, I'm excited to have you joining us. Man, me and Caleb have been friends for, is it 7 years? Been a while.
Yeah, seven, 8, something like that.
So I was at a church before I came here called Westside Baptist Church. And whenever I transitioned to my new church, Caleb was the one that followed me in student ministry. And he did such a better job than I did. He
I don't
took
know
the
about
little crumbs that I left
that.
him and flourished it. And so that was kind of our shared friendship. We had a shared experience. And so we were able to kind of have that bond. And then he's been able to move on to a church closer to his home. And so he's doing great things there. And so I just know you're a veteran of the game and you've been doing student ministry really, really well. And so I know you're going to be able to give us some good advice today. So I'm excited for some of these guys to learn from you today. And so if you would, just let people know where you're serving, what God has you doing right now.
Yeah, so I'm serving at a church called Northcrest Baptist Church in Meridian, Mississippi. And like you said, it's closer to home. So I'm like 2 hours from home, where we had been more like 7.5 when we were in Natchitoches. But yeah, so we've been here 4.5 years now. Been serving here and seeing God do a lot of things through the ministry. And so we're excited for next phases and just trying to be faithful.
Yeah, the next year or two for your ministry is really going to just shift completely. Anyway, we got to get into all that. But
Yeah, for sure. Actually, you're talking about it shifting. I mean, really, like I didn't intentionally wear my Northcrest shirt. We had a big meeting today as we're getting ready to renovate an old bowling alley that we've purchased
cool.
that we're converting to a student center. And so we met with our architect today, just looking at some floor plan options and really getting that ball moving. So I'm excited. I mean, you're talking, it's a huge space. It's going to be a blessing to have and a lot of souls to be won in there, hopefully.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I can maybe bring you back in a year or two and just talk about, man, how that went and what all stuff, and what we shouldn't have done this, but we did
Yeah.
this. Things are really good. So that'll
Yeah.
be fun. But anyway, the format of the podcast is real simple. You said you watched some of the episodes, so I'm just going to ask you a few of the questions about you as a minister and how you think through ministry and how we can all learn from you today. And so the first question I want to ask is, I don't know that I know the answer. I've heard it before, but how did you know that you were called to ministry?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny how it happened. So when I was about 16 or 17, I remember specifically the night. And I share this story a lot with our students because I want them to know, hey, don't run from the calling like I did. So when I was about 16 or 17, I remember sitting in a worship service, midweek service at my church. And I can't remember what my youth pastor preached. I can't tell you the set list, what we sang that night. But what I do remember is a moment thinking and reflecting, man, I could see myself in student ministry. I could see myself doing this. And very quickly, I felt probably Satan telling me, no, dude, you're not. Like, that's not you. And so some self-doubt crept in.
Mm-hmm.
And what I began to do was look around the room. He could do it better than me. He could do it better than me. He could do it better than me. And I made myself an excuse real quick as to why God wasn't calling me into ministry. And so for the next probably close to 8 years, I kind of tried to fit my plan into the mold instead of saying, okay, God, what do you have for me? And that looked like changing my major in college probably 5 or 6 times, wasting some time in college, ultimately graduating with a degree that I would never use fully, not really, to finally say in about a year and a half out, like, okay, God, I've been running from you. I see what you have planned for me, at least a little glimpse of it. Here I am, I'm going to surrender. And so when I was about 24, 25, somewhere in there, really just said, okay, God, I think ministry is what you have for me. And I prayed a lot about it. My wife, I was married at that point, talked to my pastor and just surrendered to ministry, and we ended up going to seminary. So after almost a decade of running, what God called me to as a teenager, I finally surrendered to in my mid-20s. So
that's awesome. Well, and the question I have, I'm sure you've had to do this. How do you help communicate to a student the difference between a call to ministry and a call to be a Christ follower. Because in student ministry, we run into that all the time, where students like, "Oh, I want to give my life to Jesus, and I'm going to go preach the gospel." It's like, well, actually, you might not. Let's walk through that. So, how do you? I know you probably have a great answer. How would you say that you've walked students through that?
Yeah. So one of the first questions we ask is, how are you being faithful now? Like, if you feel
Okay.
called to be a missionary in Africa, or if you feel called to be a senior pastor in Louisiana or wherever,
Yeah, yeah,
student pastor, whatever you're called to, are you being faithful right now? And so we've had, oddly enough, we had coming out of COVID, we probably had 10 or 12 students say they felt called to ministry. And
that's
so
awesome.
we've been kind of experiencing, like, how do you counsel through that? And so the number one thing, we try not to discourage anybody. We want to encourage them, like, hey, keep fleshing that
Yeah,
out, keep pursuing that. But the number one thing is, how are you being faithful right now? If you're not being
hmm
faithful now and telling people about Jesus where you are, then you're probably not gonna go
hmm
somewhere else and do it. And so
yeah,
we just kind of, time will tell, and we're going to
yeah,
encourage you and seek to mentor you and help pick you up in any questions you have. We're gonna try to answer those, and if we can't, at least get you somebody who can.
yeah,
So the big thing is just, how are you being faithful right where you are,
yeah,
and let's see how that plays out, so to speak, over the next couple of years. Because we say your number one mission is, you're going to finish high school.
yeah.
You need to value your education now, because if you feel called to ministry, you don't have to go to seminary, but
hmm
it's very beneficial. And
Yeah,
so, before you can go to seminary, you need to finish high school. So
yeah.
that's been our big thing: be faithful now and get through this phase, and then we'll counsel with you on to the next one.
And as a student pastor, I know for me, I try to look for opportunities when a guy or a girl comes up and says, "Hey, I feel called to ministry." Well, let me give you, here's a shot to do this.
Oh,
Here's a shot to do
absolutely.
that. And so, or bringing them with you on trips,
Yeah,
and I do that with just guys. Let me just be clarified. I don't take the girls with
yeah,
me on
yeah,
trips.
absolutely.
Uh, but like if I'm going to do a D now at a local church
Mhm.
or not a D now, or I D now sometimes, but like I've done it for like fifth quarters. I'm going to go do a fifth quarter for a church that's not too far. I'll take a student with me so they can see what ministry's like. And, so trying to bring students along, I think, is also helpful too, or give them opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, what
Well,
were you going to say?
Well, yeah, I think giving them opportunity is a big thing. We've had student-led services, and we say, hey, if you're interested and feel called to ministry, let's sit down and talk about a message, and let you stand up and speak to the group.
Yeah.
Um, our our current college pastor was in the student ministry when I got here. I mean, when we gave him, he was given opportunities, not just me, people before me too. He was given opportunities. Hey, here's a chance, speak.
Yeah.
And we can see even how God's worked through his life and ministry along the way, and how
Yeah.
he's grown him so much. But from a devotional at school all the way to as intern, giving him ample
Mm.
opportunities to preach then. I mean, I think opportunity, not just talking in theory in an office, but giving us
Yeah.
an opportunity to say, hey, here's a platform. Let's see how it goes.
Absolutely. Next question I was going to ask is you've been in ministry for a good while now. So, probably the way you did ministry when you first started and the tools and resources you used are not what you use today, or maybe there's some, but what would you say has been the most impactful resources for you as a minister? Maybe something you use daily or something you use weekly. But what does that look like for you?
Yeah,
Resources that you use?
yeah, it's definitely changed. I mean, I think, one, resources hopefully are, a lot of these companies are constantly adapting, and so
Yeah.
you see what benefits you where you are. But I know one thing that I've used. I don't use it as much this year, but I've used it in the past. It's the DYM University, Download Youth
Yep.
Ministry University. We've
Yeah.
used that. I had a friend of mine in ministry recommend it, and I knew of their website, and I knew of the
Mhm.
games and activities and even lessons, but I had not used the training videos, and they have a lot of good stuff, and I've used that. Probably a year and a half ago, I used for my adult leaders. Like, hey, I want you to watch some of these videos, give them access so that they could go and watch it. And it's really
Yeah.
good how they have it layered. I think training is probably one of like training my leaders, and whether it's student leaders or adult leaders, what resources do you train them with? How do you train them?
Hmm.
More than just go do this, go do that. What's some things to encourage them? And
Yeah.
sometimes I do feel like the benefit comes from knowing who to lead them to. And sometimes
Yeah.
these guys on there they have way. You called me a tenured or experienced or something, made me feel old, but those guys have been around a lot longer than you and I have, and so
Yeah.
hearing from them has been beneficial. So we use their training resources, and it's layered. It's like Youth Ministry 101, 201, 301. It's really good stuff, and
Yeah.
it gets deep, like how to handle certain situations. But the number one resource I'm using right now is YM360. I mean, I
Okay.
tell people every chance I get, like, how great they are.
Yep.
We use them for our life group material, and we've used them for a couple of years now, and it's just well written. It's really, they know their audience,
Yep.
and so that's the number one thing. The second, I mean, I love it because teachability, their material. It's easy to say, my teacher called in. I have somebody to sub. They don't teach every
Yeah.
week. It's real easy for them to jump in. It's a good source. But more than that, they have some phenomenal parent resources. And so
Yeah.
this past year, if there's a youth pastor out there looking for something like this, you can bundle it. You can bundle life group sources as well as like what is it called, the YM360 Plus, and so you can get
Yeah.
parent resources. And so for me, that's really good because I'll try to grab some of those things and send them to parents, and they make it so simple to use, but it's
Hmm.
good information. So I really have gone from this resource to this resource to this resource, and I'm kind of landing on
Yeah.
YM360 right now. And each
Yeah.
season they've all been good. That's
Yeah.
just where I am right now.
Yeah, and I'll just second Y360. That's what our student ministry uses. We've used it for I think 8 years now.
Wow.
And like you said, one of the things I love about it is I stress to my teachers, I would love for you to study Monday through Sunday. I'm aware that doesn't happen every time.
Right.
I'm aware that sometimes it's either Saturday night or you just whirled in Sunday. You're like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
If that's the case, this curriculum is built in such a way that you can teach it
Mhm.
because it is discussion heavy.
That's
There
right.
is there's a lot of material to get through that you can take a lot of time, but it also is like, hey, this is what's happening in the passage. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me what you think about that. Okay, cool. Let's look at the next section. So it is, as a teacher, you're not going to have to monologue for 30 minutes on
That's
something,
right.
but you can walk it through. So if you are looking for curriculum, I would also recommend Y360. It's great. I've looked at Download Youth Ministries University. I got a sample of it. It did look great. And so that is something
Okay.
I've considered for our people.
I tried this. I have a friend who said he did this, and I tried it for a year, and it was good. It just it wasn't necessarily practical to do as extreme as I was trying to. Like anybody who wanted to volunteer, tell them they had to complete 101
Yeah.
to volunteer. It wasn't really that practical, even though I had a lot of my volunteers do it. Like I
Yeah.
know, like whenever they would complete it, it would send me like a certificate of completion for them.
Yeah.
And I ended up adapting a little and saying, "Hey, we're gonna have a meeting, leaders meeting, and we're gonna watch it together. And instead of you answering the discussion questions for yourself, we'll just discuss it." We had
Yeah.
some really good meetings over a couple of those videos. We just said, "Hey, we're gonna watch it. We're gonna spend 30 minutes just talking about the questions," and my life group teachers did really well with it too. They enjoyed it.
Yeah. So if you're a youth minister listening to this, or you're a discipleship pastor, or whatever you are, that this is something an easy resource you can use to help equip your leaders, because our
Mhm.
leaders want to be equipped. They want to do a good job. Leaders
Right.
don't want to be a bad teacher.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
they're striving for, or they're longing for those tools. And so this is something easy that we can get and use. And so I've been able to hear you preach a few different times, and I think you're a good communicator. You communicate clearly. And so, what would you say is your process in developing a message or even a series for
Yeah.
students? Like, what is whenever you're going to the pulpit, what are you bringing with you? What are you trying to, is it opening, 3 points, closing, whatever? And then how do you develop out? Hey, I'm going to do the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks on this topic.
Yeah, I think I'm probably a little more unconventional. I would
Okay.
think I've always kind of I guess, wore that badge. I may just be giving it to myself unfairly, but I tend to try to go through books of the Bible on
Yeah.
Wednesdays, and so and I do try to alternate Old Testament, New Testament, and probably
Mm-hmm.
2 to 3 times a year I'll throw in a topical series based off of what I've kind of sensed the pulse of our student ministry, or hey, I'm hearing this group of kids I'm around a lot just listening. This is something they need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to know where they are as students. But we'll usually go through a book. Like right now, we started a series in the book of Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm.
As I told, we have a group of pastors who meet once a week and discuss what we're teaching. And I said, I'm not going to go. I can't go one chapter a week because that's 50. I mean, it's 52 chapters. You're going to be in it literally a whole year.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we break it down to make it a lot shorter than that. But I usually would just go, I'll pick a book and try to really, so they're hearing the Bible, going through different books of the Bible. I'm not good and crafty necessarily at topical sermons, but I will try to do
Yeah.
1 or 2 a year. And so one thing that's kind of been my typical model. I have a friend of mine at First Baptist Halton who does small groups on Wednesday night, and I've been encouraged by that. We actually did a small group series to start the year off, and it went I would say, vast majority really loved it.
Yeah.
We would come together, and then we'd split off into small groups, and we did a kind of a package deal. I didn't write it. I purchased it, and the students loved that. Probably gonna work that in a little bit. So I'm kind of branching out on the communication and the lessons. But the main thing we do is we just pick a book of the Bible. And so in the past couple of years, the biggest one was, so coming out of COVID, I say coming out of COVID, like COVID just ended,
Yeah.
coming out of the quarantine, shelter in place season. So I guess it would have been 2021. We went through the book of Revelation. Now that took a while. That took,
With students?
yes. And dude, let me tell you, they loved it.
I bet. Yeah.
During that time, I had read somebody did this, and so it's not my unique idea, but we did a QR code while I was
Mm-hmm.
preaching that you could scan and ask an anonymous question. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm preaching and you had a question, you could ask on this digital platform, and I had no clue who it was. And that alone opened up so many relationships because they felt comfortable asking questions. Okay, I can really ask this hard question about what's this mean. You said this about this verse in Revelation 12. What does that, so I don't just try to tackle the hard stuff to tackle the hard stuff, but we have addressed some of it. But part of what you said was, what all do I take with me? So I try to have an outline. Usually I probably have closer to a full manuscript, but I'm not that, I can't stick to it word for word.
Yeah,
so I type out a lot. It's usually an intro and a couple of points, 2 or 3. I try not to force just to have 3. So
yeah. So a question that came up to me, like I know I've done this before because for anybody's listening, I have middle schoolers that I speak to weekly, and so I found that I can't do a series more than 4 weeks on a particular topic, or if I did a book series, I can't do. If I get into 5 weeks, they're kind of like, "All right, dude, we've talked about this, we get it." Even though every week it's different, like every week it's something.
Yeah.
They just zone out, and so like I've had to, if I'm picking a book that has 12 chapters. I'm having to find the highlights of like, okay, what are the 4 or 5 maybe big things that I want to address in this? How do you nail that down? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's difficult. Like, so that's one thing with Jeremiah that I really struggle with, because I'm like, okay, where do I cut? Where do I jump? How do I? And so I've just kind of looked at some different resources and some outlines. I talked to my discipleship pastor, like he had actually taught through it a couple of years ago and had an outline that they had used, and it's going to be longer than 4 weeks.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just try to hit the high points where I can also build, like I can come in and say, okay, all right, guys, so we jumped. This is what you missed. This is what's going on, and now we're here,
Yeah.
And the Old Testament being more, the New Testament story too, but it's not as narrative. Like, it's a little easier to preach because you can say, okay, here's the command. Go do it, not all of it, but a lot of it's more that way. The Old Testament being more story form almost makes it more difficult for me to jump
Okay.
to make big jumps. But I just try to man, that's a tough one. I don't know that I do it well. I just I try to see some breaking points and
Yeah.
jump and say, okay, this is curtain shut. This is what you missed, and then here we are.
And you kind of mentioned it for me too. I go online and see what did other people do? Like
Yeah.
what did other people's outlines look like?
Mhm.
And like sometimes like I found a guy like I'll find a random church that did Hebrews. They did 60 weeks in Hebrews. And I'm like, how in the world? So like I'll kind of just look through and be like, all right, that one sounds cool. All right, that one sounds cool. Let me look at how
Mhm.
that would be worded in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And so taking 4 or 5 other people's outlines, noticing the theme of like this was a big one, this was a big one, this was a big one. Let me look at those. Let me study those a little more. And so it's not bad to go online and look up stuff and like have
No,
ideas from other people. I think some people get into that. It's like I can't. It's all got to come from my brain. It's like, well, no, it doesn't. Like,
there's nothing there's nothing new under the sun, and I've had to
yeah,
remind myself that a lot in ministry because you look over here and just a lesson as far as like being. I mean, it's hard. It's easy to do this even having been in ministry 10+ years, but especially starting out, you're like, well, this group's doing this, I need to do that, or this group's doing
hmm
that, I need to do that. You don't have to. You shouldn't copycat
yeah,
like verbatim. But if there's one thing that I learned in seminary writing papers, it was you don't have to have a lot of original thought. You just have to know how to make it work for your context. And so,
yeah,
same
absolutely,
way in writing a paper, you're researching what other people say, learning it, and making it. You're kind of combining their thought and making it your thought. But
yeah,
same thing in ministry. I mean, we talked about how we both have circles that we talk to and say, "Hey, what are y'all
yep,
doing with this?" Well,
hmm
that's the cool thing about it. I can say, "Hey, Blake, what are y'all doing there?" Well, our
yep,
cultures are different, but I can still take it, adapt it, and mold it, and shape
yep,
it into what my group needs. Um, and it's going to look different, but big picture, we're kind of piggybacking to help each other. That's how it should be.
absolutely. Another big part of student ministry is communicating with parents, and so I'm sure you've had to do that. You've had your ups and downs with that, as we all have. But how have you found to effectively communicate with parents? And then, do you have like specific meetings? And we kind of talked about trainings a little bit with our leaders, but do you have meetings or trainings that you do with parents?
I would, yeah, that's tough. Like you said, ups and downs. I would say I try to send out periodically some
hmm
videos. YM360 is one that I started using this year. That they have a monthly resource, and as a part of that is usually not just for your training, but also some resources for your parents.
Yeah.
And they make it super easy to send out in an email form. They a
hmm
lot of times they even have a video attached that you can watch the video. And if I do that, um, during the week, I'll just blast it via email. Like
Yeah.
I have our church membership database, and I can just click all my parents and send it to them.
Yeah.
If it's a week to week kind of thing, like, hey guys, coming up Sunday or next Sunday, we're going to have a late night in the gym after church
hmm
on Sunday night. We have a group me that has a lot of
Yeah.
parents. I don't know that all the parents are on the group me for whatever
Yeah.
reason, but I'll send it that way. And it depends on what it is. If it's more of a routine week to week thing, it's going to be more group me or that's probably the main way, or like a quick email, just a quick
Yeah. Yeah.
email. But I will send periodically kind of training or encouragement videos and emails to them. I try to have at least 3 meetings a year.
Okay.
Try not to overload them with parent meetings, but
hmm
3 a year is kind of fall, spring, and then somewhere in the summer before camp. And so
Okay.
it kind of provides them different information. Here's some things coming up in this semester. Here's some things coming up, and then in the summer, I'll give them a rundown of what all's going on in the summer, but also say, hey, here's what you need to know for the events like camp, if we were doing a mission trip, whatever we're doing. So I'll probably do 3 meetings a year. That's what I aim for. And then I'll send emails throughout the year. And cool thing is, well, they may not know this, but whenever I send the email, I can go back on our database to actually see who opened it. So that's nice.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it may be, I mean, it may be nice. Sometimes it's discouraging, but no, it's not. It's always
No.
good.
My favorite is when a parent says, "Man, I didn't know about that event." I'm like, "Yes, you did.
Yeah,
You read it."
you got it. Not only did you get it, you opened the email. That's right.
Twice.
Twice. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I sent it to your spouse. Anyway, y'all
Yep.
both
Yep.
got
Yep.
it. So, but yeah,
So those.
that's usually what I do. I try to have three, and then we changed our D now. We don't call it D now anymore. We call it Surge Weekend. As a lot of people I know have changed, kind of
Yeah.
rebranded what D now is. But when we rebranded it as a church. And so it's like a church discipleship weekend. And so we still do our own thing, but we have something for children and we have something for adults. And so one thing we've tried to do is have breakout sessions, or the first year we did breakout sessions where you had like age-based parent
Yeah.
training. So like if you had kids that were preschool, you would want to go to this one. If you had a kid that was middle school, so on. We even have one if you're an empty nester, this is a good breakout for you. And so we've kind of seen that as it's not just my effort. It's as a church, we're trying to make a conscious effort to communicate with parents. And so even next year, 2025, whatever year it is, 2025, we're already planning that one to make it even more special. Bringing in a speaker who specifically does that kind of thing. He speaks to students and parents all the time, and so try to really even ramp it up, make the most of that. So they're not just hearing from me, but we'll bring somebody in who will also invest in them during that time.
So two things. Back to the videos you were talking about just a minute ago. Focus on the family. And I'm sure you've heard of it. Other people have probably heard of it. Focus on the Family has really good, like 2-minute videos that on parenting, and then they have like 25, 30-minute where they bring in an expert. So sending out videos, Focus on the Family is really good for anybody listening.
Awesome.
Back to the D now, talking about bringing in a church-wide discipleship aspect.
Yeah.
For those who have listened to the last several episodes, Billy Lonsberry is a youth pastor at Calvary in Alexandria. He brought me and Clint Davis, who just did a podcast on here too with me, brought me and Clint in to do a parent training on the Saturday of D Now. So kids had a session on Friday night, then they were in host homes. Saturday they were out serving or doing something. And I think they had a main session in the church. But then in another part of the church, all the parents came in and heard from Clint, who was amazing. And then they also, unfortunately, had to hear from me. But it was. I thought that was so cool that hey, we're equipping the students. Let's equip the parents too. And so that sounds like what you're doing. So if anybody's got a D now, man, use that momentum to get parents too.
Yeah. So Richard Ross says, are you familiar? Richard Ross, he's
oh yeah,
kind of the granddaddy of it all, I guess. So
no spoiler alerts, but he's going to be at 412 next year.
Nice. Well, he's going to be at Surge next year. So there you go.
Boom. There it is. Nice. So, I'll blur it out. No one will know.
Yeah, nobody knows. Yeah. Some of my parents know already. But anyway, so he's coming, and he was my professor at Southwestern when I was in seminary there. And so he's going to come. But one thing he says about reaching your parents in student ministry, he highly recommends doing it at D Now because you're already going to have a lot of parents there. And he would say, from what he has seen through the years, it's easier to get parents on campus the same weekend their kids are on campus than it would be to say, hey, we're going to have this D Now, and then next month we're going to have a parent weekend. And we don't want to do 2 weekends, 2 months in a row, And so he was excited when we talked about him coming because he said that's kind of been the message he's been pushing. So I was glad to hear that. So I'm excited to have him here.
Yeah. So
he's going to be good for y'all too. It's going to be great.
He's going to be, hitting in his wheelhouse at that event. Anyway. All right, last thing, something that I know I've been able to see that you do really, really well in your student ministry, and we've just been able to share stories of how you're doing it. So I just want you to be able to share with some people here. But you've done a great job building up your student leadership team and giving students opportunity to serve. And so what would you say has been the key to getting that started, and what does the structure look like for your student leadership team?
Yeah, so I kind of look at student leadership in two different facets. So with a youth praise band, for one, we kind of started that from the ground up a couple of times. The key to that, is that and just a leadership team, whether they're separate or the same group, is just what I found is trust. and giving them a platform. And so, like, I know you said, we talked about that earlier, but if you give them a platform and show that you trust them and show it's okay if you get up there and fall, like we
Yeah.
all have been there, um, they see that it's okay to fail, and then I feel like they kind of run with it even more. And so with the praise band, we kind of built it from the ground up, and it's gone. I mean, there's times that it's really bad. Like it's
Mm.
okay. You got to start
Yeah.
somewhere. And we've been basic to not and complex, but the biggest thing for me is when you delegate to the kids or adults. Like I've seen this in
Yeah.
adults, just maybe even more so in their parents. Like when you delegate, you got to show that you trust them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a professor. It wasn't Richard Ross. It was a different one, different student ministry professor. Said,
Johnny Derwin.
Johnny Derwin. Yeah. You know Johnny. Yeah. So it was Johnny Derwin. He said, let a kid get up and do the announcements, and it's okay. It's going to be terrible.
Yes,
He's
it's
like,
gonna
it's
be.
going to
That's
be
fine.
terrible, but it's okay. And so, for me, the big thing is if you have a leadership team, whether it's kids or whether it's adults, give them a task and let them do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you let them do it, they're going to see that one, you trust them. Whoa, he trusts us to do this. And two, they're going to be like, well, I would have done this different. They're going to start to evaluate, how would I do this? How would
Yeah.
I not do this? And it's just trial and error. And I don't know about you. Sometimes that's the best way to learn. There's
Absolutely.
certain things you don't want to learn that way. But when it comes to planning an event or this or that, give it within reason. I have some students right now. We've kind of been we were really focused in on the praise team when I got
Yeah.
here, and so we were really building that up and building some volunteers and getting some adults in place that I knew were stable leaders. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're really pushing the student leadership team, and I've got one in place now, and um, we're really talking about some different tasks. And when I say different tasks, like it doesn't have to be what we would say, man, that's earth shattering. Something that's in their wheelhouse. I'm not
Yeah.
creating. I've told them, hey, one of your first tasks is going to be design a shirt. Design a shirt.
Yeah.
Like, what's a shirt for Northcrest students that we could have and we could push? They're planning a service. So talking about giving them a platform where they feel called to ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I've just tried to give them platforms to speak. At Westside, I did that. I had
Mm-hmm.
several students who had different opportunities to write a message, get up and deliver it. And we went over it. We went through it. I didn't just say, go write a message. You're preaching next week. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's
Yeah.
not. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Help them plan it. Help them think through it. Um, but I would think the biggest thing is trust them. Don't micromanage them.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes difficult. Um, but it's okay. Let them. Students, you're going to have to guide a little more. Where
Yeah.
adults, you get the right adults in place, you can say, go do this, and they know what's expected, and they'll go do it. But with the students, I see, guide them, but let them do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the biggest thing I feel like is just saying, okay, we're going to go do it. And if it's not good, we'll reevaluate and see where it wasn't good, and then we'll do it again.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
in fact, I'll go back to Westside since that was
Yeah.
our mutual places of serving. Daniel Johnson was one, and we just talked on the phone yesterday. We've talked a lot. He's actually in seminary, so
That's awesome.
I remember he got up and spoke. Our first student-led worship service, he got up and spoke, and I love him, but it wasn't the greatest ever.
No.
But at the
Yeah.
same time, like he served as interim, like he
Yeah.
didn't give up. He stayed faithful, and now he surrendered to ministry and going to serve. But we all have to start somewhere. So I would say just giving them trust, letting them know that you're going to stand there in their corner and guide them, but you're going to let them do their thing, because everybody's got their gifts, and if you want a leadership team around you, you just got to play to their strengths. Don't try to make them play to yours.
Yeah. And like for us, like a simple little thing that our student leadership team does is like we have them lead game time. So I have like a
Yeah.
group of 4 guys that lead the games. And so they kind of rotate in, and I'll come up with the game and have it ready for them. I show up and tell them, all right, this is the game, let them do it. But when they're leading it, but what's been cool is we had a 2 guys that started it. They're now in college. But because they got to lead that, and every week they got to speak to 100, 150, 200 kids, how many teenagers are getting to do that every week? They're
Right.
not. And so even if they don't go into ministry, they have a skill now that, like, hey, I know how to command a room. I know how to
Right.
leading games is hard. And so
Yeah.
if they can lead a game, they can do a presentation in their class of 40, with no problem. And
This
so you got a resource? I saw you
this
grab something.
this book right here, Designed to Lead. I read it a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago. It talks about the church and leadership development. But what you just said,
Mm-hmm.
like, even if they're not called to ministry, they still can go lead because they've had the experience of commanding a room or keeping the attention of a big crowd. Because, I mean, let's be honest, 200 people, that's a large crowd.
Yeah, for anybody.
Most churches in the Southern Baptist Convention aren't but 100. So
Yeah.
so that's a great, and the kind of the premise behind the book, what I remember, it's been a little while, but what I remember about that book is it talks about how the church should be doing that. The church should be the place that creates leaders, the best leaders, not to necessarily keep inside the church. Yes, we want them serving, we want them leading, but the people who lead the best in the secular world should be being sent out by the church. And so whether we're teaching them to be pastors or whether we're teaching them to just be leaders with upstanding character, I mean, you're doing both. If you're letting them have the chance to lead a 5-minute game, they're still learning skills they will use forever.
Yeah. And then, as you were saying a minute ago, when they come off the stage, it's almost every week, and they've been doing it for years now. They'll come off stage, they'll come right to me, and they'll look at me and be like, "All right, how was that?" And so I try to do the compliment sandwich. It's like, man, I love your intro, bro. You came in with a lot of energy. Hey, y'all probably could have communicated this part a little clearer because it wasn't super clear. But man, overall, y'all did so good. I'm so thankful that y'all led that. Start with the praise.
That's right.
This part sucked, but hey, but you did really good. Just because they want feedback, that they want to grow. Students don't want to do a bad job, like we talked about earlier with our leaders. People don't want to do things bad.
That's right.
Encourage them on what they do good. Celebrate what you want to duplicate, but ultimately, give them some criticism in love and say, all right, but we're going to do it better next week. We're going to work together and we're going to make it better. And so that's what student ministry is all about. Parents, students, and leaders, equipping them to do better and to be able to grow and be more like Jesus. And so anyway, sorry.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, one thing we did, we started grabbing a couple of students and helping plan events with the adults. So like our D-Now or Surge Weekend, we grabbed a couple of our more stout leaders in the youth group, even if they weren't officially on leadership team. Like, hey, will you come to this meeting? We're going to have a meeting where we're planning out some of the details. We want you in there. And so we brought them in. So last year we brought in 2 seniors who were just great leaders. And we said, okay, what are some things that you would love to see? And we just got a lot of us just getting their input, and that goes so much further than just student ministry. Like, I mean, so many people just want to be heard. They just want a voice. And so I think really what you said and what I've said, it's all about you give them a voice and give them a platform to be heard, and then maybe help guide them and push them the right direction just to help, because we all need that. And then those leadership skills will be created and developed, and they'll go on to use them forever.
And then when we do that well, we can step back and let them do ministry.
That's right.
Because that's our job, is to equip the church to do the ministry where they eventually don't need us anymore. They can do it. And
work yourself out of a job.
Yep. Well, Caleb, man, this has been fun and really practical. I think a lot of people that are listening to this are going to be able to take some stuff away, be able to implement it immediately into whatever God has them doing. So thank you for giving up some time and being a part of this today.
Yeah, man, I'm thankful to be here. And as always, Blake's the man.
Whatever. Well, that's kind. But anyway, if you're listening to the podcast for the first time, or maybe you've listened to several episodes, if you have not subscribed yet, that's the only way you're going to be able to get the updates every Monday to know what's coming. And so we got a few more guests lined up for the end of season 2. So looking forward for you to get to hear those. But make sure you subscribe to be plugged in to not miss anything. We'll catch you on the next episode.